this stage for so small crowd. So let's start this workshop with that will be led by Jane Macky and Angie Scott from We the Village. And we will develop our skills with the craft program this afternoon. So
Awesome. Thank you.
it's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. So we're going to talk about, let me make sure my clicker is working. Yeah, scaling professional capacity in craft to generate a collaborative and compassionate response to substance use disorder. So I shared yesterday, for those of you who joined us in that presentation, we've developed online craft for families, but we recognize that we also need professionals trained in craft. So today, we want to talk a little bit about, we'll cover a little bit of the craft research, but we're going to move into how craft actually works, what it is, and then specific procedures in the model, which Angie will take us through. So I'm Jane, founder and CEO of We the Village, certified in craft, and been working in the model, since about 2019, or certified in 2019. And this is a wonderful family services manager and training manager at We the Village, Angie, and she's going to take us through some really fun exercises for you guys here today. We provide online programs that are proven to get families through addiction recovery. Talked a little bit about that yesterday as well. Like, we're really focused on making sure that our programs work, so we have clinical trial data behind them. And we talk about helping families and training professionals to treat addiction. We work directly with Dr. Robert Meyers. He is the leader of this approach. He's written this wonderful book, Get Your Loved One Sober, also the Craft Treatment Manual for Substance Use Problems, which is a great one to purchase and digest, creator of Community Reinforcement and Family Training, or CRAFT, and he's our Chief Training Officer. So he's actually a part of our company as he sort of steps more into retirement. We have been collaborating with him to bring CRAFT online, and our sort of next phase is getting it out there, which is exactly why we're focusing on training professionals. So CRAFT is a leading empirically supported treatment. I shared this yesterday, but for anyone that wasn't there, it's been studied in 11 well-controlled clinical trials, meaning it had a comparison condition, over 40 years from 1986 to today, over 1,000 participants who are the concerned family members. It works across relationships. Often we're seeing parents or spouses, but it's been shown, and in our studies we have all different types of relationships, and then across different types of substances as well. And then it gets these reliable results. So across these 11 well-controlled trials, on average, it gets 68% treatment entry within 3 months, versus on average in the control conditions, 23%. And usually those are compared with Al-Anon or 12-step approaches versus interventions and interventions. So we know that treatment entry piece is really reliable and important. It can be really useful. So 70% get treatment in just 3 months, but it's not just about treatment. So we see more connection, decreased substance use in their loved one, and improved well-being for the CSO. And these are really, really important outcomes. So what is CRAFT? Do you want to click? Do you want me to click?
I want you to click.
Okay.
And I think, I swear I turned it on, but I have it on that.
Not on.
Is that work?
Not on.
But it is on.
Try the other one.
Okay. I'll go up here. I will. So I like to move when I speak. What Jane didn't say about in my intro was that I'm Angie Scott, for anyone that missed the first few minutes, but I came to We the Village as a client. So I found We the Village when my husband was struggling with alcohol use disorder, and I went through the program. I can become really excited about things that work for me. So as you'll see, 5 years later, I'm here as a full-time employee from We the Village. But I do think that the most important part of my experience is how I used craft in my own life. And now I just feel so honored to be able to walk alongside others that are in similar situations. So that being said, what is craft?
What is craft? It's a good question to ask, because typically in alcohol and drug programs, it's all about the user of alcohol, the user of drugs. But sometimes we leave the family member behind. And craft is all about taking care of the family, period. And so we're going to teach a family member how to take care of themselves and how to change their interactions with the loved one, the one that's using inappropriately alcohol or drugs, to help them get into treatment. There's so many people who don't want to go to treatment for several reasons, and we can talk about that later. But craft really helps the family member get their life together, feel better about who they are, deal with the problems they have when they come in. Let them tell us what's going on in their family and what we can help them with. Sometimes they unintentionally support using behavior, and they don't quite understand why they keep using drugs. So that's what we're here for. So what we're going to do is we're going to really take the way they interact now and help them change that to a more passionate way that would help them get their loved one into treatment so they can help the family. Learning how to communicate differently, learning how to solve problems, and learning how to maybe walk away when somebody wants to argue with you is different ways we can help them learn how to use those different pieces to get their loved one into treatment.
So that's Dr. Robert Meyers, Craft's creator, and like me, like Jane, he also has a personal connection to this work. And so Craft was born out of his personal experiences watching addiction unfold in a family. And so I think that is kind of woven through all the work that we do, that we all have this very personal experience and feel very connected personally to this content. So our training, that's a little bit of our training for professional staff, and Dr. Meyers goes through each of the 9 core craft procedures in our training to talk about what you can expect. So I'd love to be able to hear it from his words, because I certainly couldn't do that justice. But so how does it work? We work directly with one CSO. We call affected family members concerned significant others. So we'll say CSO a lot. There's a lot of acronyms in craft, just as you can probably tell. So we work with one or more concerned significant other that is motivated to change their behaviors. So we see that CSOs come to us highly motivated. They're getting all the negative effects of the substance use and none of the positives. So they're really ready to do something. We empower them with skills. So the skills are designed to shift their behaviors and the way that they're interacting with their loved one, but also to focus on their own well-being. We reiterate time and time again that CSOs are not responsible for their loved one's substance use, but they are so influential and they can change the trajectory of addiction and substance use. Using positive reinforcement, we help CSOs reward sober behavior so that time spent not using is more enriching, more enjoyable. I always say, give them more joy, more play, more love, more connection, and we remove the rewards for substance using behavior. We look at, as Bob said, unintentional supportive use. So are there things that the loved one is doing that makes it a little bit easier for substance use to continue? And are there ways we can shift those behaviors? So it's a very collaborative approach, and there's not shame and blame, but are there things that you're doing that maybe we can change and see what happens? It's very experimental. Let's try this and see. And it's personalized. So craft is a protocol. There's 9 core procedures, but what it looks like can be very different. So in our craft groups and our family groups, we might have a parent next to a spouse, next to a parent of an adolescent. We're teaching them all the same skills, but then the way they're going to apply them with their loved one is going to look different. You're not going to reward a 45-year-old the same way that you're going to reward a 13-year-old, although sometimes both of those people love Legos. So maybe you will, but it will look different, and we can just apply the skills in multiple settings. And we really firmly believe, we've seen it in our own lives and we've seen it in families that we work with, that recovery is possible and rock bottom is not a requirement. So we can help people shift their behaviors way earlier using this approach. And the way that we do that is through practical skills. And so here are two of our worksheets. We're actually going to talk about both of these in our session today, but two of the really important skills that we talk about in craft are positive communication and then also the functional analysis. And so we'll go into those in more detail, but these are some of the examples of worksheets that we give clinicians in our training program and also the clients that we work with, the families.
So just to give you a little snapshot of the core 9 procedures, as Angie has mentioned, these are the core sort of 9 craft procedures. If someone is certified in the method, they've demonstrated fidelity to these different procedures. There are a few additional ones which we do include in our training, but these are the core ones we focus on. So motivational induction, why are you here? What do you want to see change? And we tell you why craft is so powerful. So this is like a typical kind of intake, but there's also a lot of information sort of shared about what you're getting into to try and get you excited to come back, really. The sort of next 3 skills are ones we're going to share more on today. They're in pink, and they're sort of these introductory skills in craft. The first one is CSOs deserve to thrive, so concerned significant others deserve to thrive. You are important. There are various reasons why, and maybe Angie will go into some of those. Positive communication is the next one. We want to reconnect people. In addiction, there tends to be a lot of sort of disconnection. We're not able to talk about these important topics, so we want to start reconnecting people so eventually they can talk about the hard things and use their influence by nature of being in relationship with this person. The functional analysis is next. We're building empathy and understanding for why their loved one is using substances, what they're getting out of it. We'll go more into that. The next series we call sort of our behavioral change trio: positive reinforcement, problem solving, withdrawing rewards, and natural consequences. So those are all about what are the levers that we can use to try and shift harmful substance use. How do we increase more positive behaviors, decrease the harmful ones, create more space to have these important conversations about getting help? So that leads into treatment invitation and entry, and we take a really broad view of what that might be. If somebody's already in treatment, or if their loved one's already in treatment, that might look like, let's debrief how that conversation went in the past. What would you do differently for the future? We're often looking at, like Angie said, really looking at what worked, what didn't, and trying to refine so that you have this sort of model in your own life of what you can use these skills for with your loved one. So when we talk about scaling the training, so we know Dr. Meyers used to travel around all over the world, and he has done an amazing job getting craft to the place it is today and to its sort of established spot. But we know that we need more. It's taking families years to find it, and we hear such great results when they do. And so training professionals, some of the things that we've done is we've brought it online. We have this, if you look kind of on the left of your screen, it's a series of little learning modules. So they are fueled by video content. Dr. Meyers is walking you through the different procedures, and we've wrapped around Dr. Meyers with sort of introductions, session prep videos, like some more clarity on all of the points to make sure that, you know, it's coming into the modern day, it's really transferable and people can digest it. We've got session guides, so exactly sort of maps of the sort of things that you need to do for each session. Professionals can follow those or not, but we know that when they use more craft, they get great outcomes, and that's what we're studying in our professional craft training study right now. Client worksheets, you'll look at some of these, you can see up here, it's all vibrant, it's sort of hopeful, optimistic, it's colorful, it's not scary, so that's really important to us. And then little knowledge quizzes. So these are some of the digital components. One other type of video component that we use is demonstration videos. So you can see Dr. Meyers running client or demonstrations of a client session and the different procedures. You can see him doing it. You can see a certified craft clinician running sessions and the exact sort of parts of the procedure that they're doing at the time. And we'll show you a few of these different elements, but these are things that are helping us train professionals online to sort of expand the reach of craft. There we go. Concerned significant other, identified patient, CSO and IP, two sort of core acronyms which may continue to pop up. So just giving them a space here so you can remember them.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about what it looks like. What does craft actually look like? And I'm going to stay down here for this part because my microphone's working, and I'd love to hear from you all. So our case study today is Julie. So as we talk about what craft is and what it looks like, you can think about, do I want to put myself in Julie's shoes today, or do you want to be the craft clinician that is working with Julie? So you've got some flexibility in how you want to approach the work today. But so Julie's our case study. She is a 39-year-old female. She's married to her husband, John. They've been married for 12 years. They have 2 children. They're 7 and 9. They started their relationship drinking. They drank together. That was how, they bonded over drinking as a part of their, dating. They drank for a lot of their years together. But Julie, as she's aged, has gradually decreased her drinking, and John has only continued to drink more. So that can create some difficulty, right? Now he's drinking up to a pint of vodka daily. He starts as soon as he gets off work. He continues until he goes to bed. And Julie's coming to treatment because she's really worried that the kids are starting to notice. Of course, they're 7 and 9. They're not oblivious. And he's starting to miss some weeknight events, not making it to sporting events, and so just not being as present as she would like. She's feeling really frustrated and unsure what to do next because the conversations about drinking tend to turn into arguments. They're not really productive anymore. He's reluctant and has been previously really hesitant to seek any form of treatment because everyone in his life drinks just like he does. What's the big deal? This is not an issue. And so she's kind of feeling stuck. So that's where Julie is when she comes to you if you're a craft clinician, and she really wants to see how she can shift this behavior. So the first thing that we do in that motivation, or one of the things that we do in that first session, is try to figure out what are Julie's reinforcers. So what is she hoping to get out of your time together? What is she hoping for John? What is she hoping for herself? How would her family life improve if he were to reduce use or seek some sort of treatment? So what is she really hoping to get out of it? And we want to write those down because when things get hard, sometimes it can be really helpful to refer Julie back to those reinforcers. So anyone have any thoughts about what Julie's reinforcers might be? If you had to guess. What was it? Her kids, so wanting them to have a nice family. Yeah, to be able to be present with their dad. Thank you. Yeah. Wanting John to reduce his drinking, right? Maybe she doesn't want him to quit. Maybe she just wants to go back to a weekend drinking with him, and so that it's manageable and they can still have, typical life. Yes. She misses the time when they were close, absolutely. She wants to feel connected to her husband of 12 years, absolutely. So those are Julie's reinforcers, great job. So now we have a sense of what Julie's hoping to get out of this. So we're gonna do positive communication. I realized when Jane was showing the modules that I went out of order. So I didn't go in the order, and that's what's great about craft because you don't have to go in any specific order. So you go where Julie wants to go, and right now she wants to go to positive communication. So the purpose of positive communication is to help rebuild connection. So we want to help them increase the communication that they're having with each other to feel like we can have productive conversations. We see that positive communication can be contagious. This is one of the things that we tell CSOs, like if you're communicating in a way that's more positive, they're more likely to respond in kind. And what positive communication doesn't mean is that you only talk about happy things. So sometimes people will say, well, there's no way that I can be positive about this because shit's hitting the fan. We say, well, that's okay. We can talk about negative things in a positive way, and we'll talk about how we can do that. And then we can really help the CSO identify ways to influence change. So we're going to hear a little bit from Bob about why communication matters and why we do this.
So let's talk about communication skills training and why it works, because it does work. So plain and simple, you're more likely to get what you want if you use communication skills in a positive way. A lot of people yell and scream and have different problems with communicating with somebody, but this is a simple way to do this. you use communication skills, you know, it's actually contagious, and other members of the family might pick it up as well, or your friends. So what we're trying to do is teach different ways for the CSO to interact with the user. Again, if you're going to talk to the user about going into treatment, you better do it in a positive way. So instead of arguing and threatening and crying and getting all upset, that doesn't work very well. So let's use positive communication skills. It also opens up doors to other satisfactions for the CSO, whether it's work, whether it's going to church, whether she's on a bowling league and talking to her friends, or moving back out into the community and doing things again. The more she learns how to be able to use her communication skills, the more happy I think she'll end up, and she'll feel better about her life. Positive communications is really one of the founding pieces of craft and has been used over the years, and it's been very successful. The clients really like to use it, whether they're adolescents or adults. Communication skills is one of the best protocols that they can use, period.
So here they are. There are 7 tips for positive communication. Be brief, be positive. Again, this doesn't mean only talking about positive things, but asking for what you want instead of what you don't want. Being clear and specific. We want to label feelings, your feelings, not your loved ones, not the IP's feelings, but yours. Offer an understanding statement. Accepting partial responsibility. You can imagine this one can be tricky sometimes. I see some faces. And offer to help. So we're going to do a little exercise in what this could look like. So for this exercise, well, first let me tell you what Julie wants to talk about. So Julie says, I want to have a conversation with John about him missing a recent dance recital. Our 9-year-old was really disappointed. I'd like to ask him to stop drinking on the weeknights when we have family events. That's where I want to start with this conversation. So I would love it if we could have 2 volunteers to help us demonstrate what positive communication looks like. And I'll tell you what this ask is. It's a low-risk ask. By that I mean, you're going to read 4 sentences each, and the first person is going to demonstrate, we're going to alternate. The first person is going to demonstrate maybe how Julie is having this conversation last week when he missed a recital. So if that person wanted to be a little sassy today on Friday afternoon, I would welcome that. And the second volunteer is going to use positive communication and try on what it feels like to maybe respond in a more compassionate way. So do I have someone that's feeling a little sassy today? Yes. Always get the sassy ones. The sassy ones are always excited. Okay, and someone, that's right. I'm going to ask if someone at this table would want to try the compassionate approach, or I can do it, but just so that we don't have to run with the mic. You can think about that. Okay, so 4 sentences. You're going to do the first one, and then I'll do the second one, or you
So I have
just read that.
I read this one.
Yes.
I wish you would stop drinking and stop letting the kids down.
It really means a lot to me and the kids when you're sober and able to attend events with us.
The kids and I are so fed up with your missing things. Enough.
Enough. I feel disappointed when I go to events alone and so sad when the children get upset about it.
It's time to be an adult and show up for your family.
I know you're under a lot of stress, and drinking is one way you cope. I've noticed that once you start drinking, you're less present with us.
You either stop drinking during the week or don't bother trying to be around.
Would you be willing to try and start drinking after the kids' events on those evenings? I can help you think of ways we can make that easier for you. All right, let's first give a round of applause to our wonderful volunteer. Thank you. No, you did wonderful. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. So what did it, and she said it wasn't that sassy. But so what are your thoughts? What are your reactions to the difference in the approaches? What stands out to you? Yeah.
The typical approach is going to make him really resistant, defensive. He's probably going to dig in his heels, and they might have a fight.
Yeah, right. They might have a fight. That's a very, very good observation. What else?
The sentences on the right, on the left, I'm sorry, were very, very judgmental and were angry driven. And on the right, it's amazing how you were able, and how the craft approach is able to make things negative positive, and how feelings come in. And really, that's really, you will state that the kids will be affected. And though you're not always speaking for yourself, you're speaking for the kids. And then you're saying, well, wouldn't you try to be sober when the kids are there? But I can be helpful, and we can drink together later on. So she doesn't close all the doors, and she doesn't ask for sobriety or abstinence. She more or less makes room for further delight, because that's how, and then she acknowledges you have stress, your present difficulties are really tremendous, and even that may be not what her experience is, she gratefully lies here. Voila.
That is a beautiful way to describe an understanding statement. So what we try to do with the understanding statement, I don't. I'm gonna go back so you can see the visual again. With the understanding statement, that's that opportunity to say, I hear your concerns. They're valid. I can understand why you drink. I understand why this is happening. And I think that's really powerful. I really like that you pointed that out. The other one that, labeling your feelings. There's a lot of information that adults really rely heavily on 3 main feelings, right? We're either happy, mad, or sad. So we try to expand that. What is it? Can we describe that in more richer terms? So get a little bit more detailed about how it's actually impacting the other person. And then the offer to help is really valuable, because you're not in this alone. We're together. We can collaborate on this. And let's start. Let's start with just having the delight after the children's event. I love that phrasing. Thank you. All right, so now we're going to move into CSOs Deserve to Thrive. So we're going to talk to Julie about how are things going for you, and how can we make your life better? Are there ways that we can improve it? We want to help her prioritize her well-being, because she matters too. We want to help her use the happiness scale I'm going to show you this tool that can get some perspective. What are some areas that are going really well? And what are some areas that are going maybe not so well that maybe we can work on? And then we're going to make a goal. So we're going to use that happiness scale to find an area where we can maybe move the needle. So Bob is going to explain in this video how he would explain to a CSO why we're doing the happiness scale and what it is.
We want to find out how you're feeling, because the more that we can find out how you're feeling at any given time, and if we can change some of the behaviors and talk to you a little bit about what you want to change in your life. And so what you can do is then you can look at all the different categories and how happy you are or how unhappy you are with different categories. So in social life, you might say you're a 3. It's kind of not very happy, but it's not really horrible. Or you may have a 9, let's say in romantic relationship, it's a 9. So things could be very different. So I want you to circle one number on each category, going from unhappy to being very happy. And then when you're done with that, I'm going to talk about some of the numbers that you circled and see what's going on. And if you got 8, 9s, and 10s, I'm not going to bother with those right now. I would like to get some of the other areas where you're not really feeling that well. And if you have a lot of 1s and you want to start working on those ones, I'm going to work on those too. Every therapist knows, craft therapist knows, that we're going to let you pick and choose what you'd like to work on. We need to follow what you want to do. But at the same time, those categories might be more difficult to move from a 2 to a 3 or a 4 than the 4 to a 5 or a 6. Does that make sense to you? If you have a 4 in one category, the 4 might be easier, because I'm going to ask you a question. What would I have to do to help you move that 4 to a 5 or a 6?
So this is an example of what the happiness scale looks like. There's 10 or 11 different areas. People can add in additional areas that might be of their interest. And what you might say if you're working with Julie is, it's not uncommon for people to have numbers across the board. It would be more rare for someone to have all 10s or all 1s. We expect that you'll have numbers in all different areas. And if you're doing this in a session with Julie, you're going to ask her, okay, so I see, here's Julie's. I see that you've got some 4s, some 5s. Maybe I'll spend some time and ask, oh, this is an 8. That's great. Tell me about that. Tell me a little bit about that. Because we don't only want to focus on the areas for improvement, right? One of the advantages of using a scale like this is it can help people take a step back, because when they're living with somebody who's experiencing substance use disorder, it can feel very chaotic and it can feel like everything is terrible. So one of the purposes of this can instill a sense of optimism. Well, okay, there are some things that are okay right now. And we don't often take time to just acknowledge that. So that can be an advantage of doing a scale like this. And then you're going to ask about, so we see some middle ones. So we're going to ask Julie, tell me about your social life. You ranked it at a 4. And so she says, well, I used to really get together with my sister a lot, and I had friends. I'm not really doing that. I'm feeling pretty isolated these days, and I can't leave the kids home alone with John. So that really limits the amount of social interactions that I'm having. So then we're going to ask, well, tell me about personal habits. And she says, well, I used to meditate every day. I used to cook dinner every night, and now I'm so tired. I feel exhausted during the day. I can't do any of that. And the only time I get to myself is at night before bed, and I just scroll on my phone. And that's not restorative, right? Doesn't feel good afterwards. So for physical health, she's ranking that at a 4 right now. She needs some blood work done, routine appointments, but she's overwhelmed, and those things just feel like too big of a burden. So as Bob said, we want to encourage Julie to work at one of those middle range items, which is why those are the ones here. We want to encourage her to pick one that maybe would be a little bit easier to move up one notch, whereas a 1 might feel just so overwhelming. Now, if Julie wants to work on a 1 and says, absolutely, this is the goal that I'm going to do, we're going to work on the 1. But we're going to encourage her to think about some of these middle ones. So as Julie, if someone has been thinking about Julie's life, I feel like some people have in this room, what would be a goal that Julie might want to work on? Because we're going to take the happiness scale, and that's going to be her homework assignment for the week. She's going to help direct this homework assignment. This is not something that you do as a clinician, but she's going to pick a goal, and we're going to help her refine that. So what might be a goal that Julie wants to work on for next week? Yeah. She said scheduling more time with friends or scheduling time with the friends and kids at the same time. So she's increasing both. That's a great suggestion. Any others? Yeah. Make a doctor's appointment that she hasn't done in a while. Yes. What else? Yeah. Maybe read a book instead of scrolling. Okay. Elise, do you have one?
You could help her planning dinners.
Oh, you could help her plan.
Yeah, okay, you could help her planning dinners, and so that they can have real food in the evening, and that evening is a prime time to discuss. And then you can ask your John not to be too intoxicated when that happens, but you would have to have 1 week or 2 weeks of dinners, and then with the children there, and then it could be possible. And probably the craft person would need to know how to plan dinners in advance, like using freezing and patata. Frequently, clinicians need to have several skills to be helpful with clients. And voila, because when people are in distress, they don't see the options in front of them.
That's a great point. Any other thoughts about what Julie might want to try next week? Okay, so we have some really good ones. We have some really good options. So what we're going to do with that is we're going to make it a SMART goal. Are we all familiar with SMART goals? Yeah. So we're going to make it attainable and measurable and specific. So the doctor's appointment example is one that doesn't require a lot of work. We don't have to do a lot to make that. That's not what that says, by the way. I didn't know that was going to come up. So we don't have to do a lot to make that a measurable goal. It's very specific. We might help her. We might say, okay, well, which doctor? Do you want to start with the blood work, or do you want to start with making the appointment first? Which one, is there one of those that feels more important to you that you would want to start with? Because maybe we don't want to tell her to do both of them. I'm going to skip to the attainable. Julie's overwhelmed. She's caring for 2 children. Her husband is having a rough time. Maybe both appointments and even calling is going to be too much for her. So we want to think really realistic. What's possible in this next week? We can set longer term goals, but what can we do this week? So maybe it's one of the appointments, just the blood work, and then she'll schedule the follow-up appointment. We can start there. We want to think about time bound. So when we're thinking about homework assignments, there's a reason that Julie hasn't done all of these things, right? She's overwhelmed. She's got a lot on her plate. So we want to help set her up for success. So when do you think would be the best time next week to call and make that appointment? Well, Tuesdays I don't have any meetings, so maybe Tuesdays would work. Okay, what happens if there's a sick kid? What's your backup plan? And I know that this sounds almost ridiculous. We're going to go to that level of detail, but if her appointments are that delayed, there's a reason. She's well-meaning. She wanted to make those doctor's appointments, but stuff comes up. So if she has a plan, yes, Tuesday noon, I'm going to call. If it doesn't happen Tuesday at noon for whatever reason, Fridays are usually a little bit lighter. I'll call then, and I'll make the appointment. And then she has a very specific, measurable, attainable goal. When she comes back next week, you can say, Julie, how did it go? How was the scheduling the doctor's appointment? Was anything about it hard? Well, yeah, actually Tuesday something did come up, and I wasn't able to do it, so I did it on Friday. And you can talk through, what kinds of things are coming up in her week. But that helps it make it really bite-sized chunks. So we want to think about, if we use the example of friends, it's a great example. So what does your next week look like? What does your Saturdays look like? Who's the friend? So we would get that level of detail and granularity so that when she leaves that session, she knows exactly what she's going to try to do. And what's great about it is if she does that, she comes back next week and she's like, I made my appointment. I got it. It's on the calendar. I feel so good because that nagging thing that's been taking up mental energy is done. Or I've got a lunch date with my friends. I'm so excited. Or I combined the two, and on Sunday, I'm meal prepping with my friend and my sister, and so, she feels good. She's got momentum, and she's excited, and she has a plan, and we can move the needle in those little ways. So this is what one might look like filled out. This is if Julie ended up seeing her sister. This is how she might walk through this. So now we're going to talk about the functional analysis. So a fancy word for what, all behavior is meeting a need. What need is this behavior meeting for John? And this can be tricky because we're asking the person who's not using the substances, tell me a lot about the substance use. Tell me what you know about it. And so we do this because we want to help increase understanding and empathy around the substance use. Sometimes we're very removed from that at this point. Sometimes CSOs it's hard to even tap into that empathy. We're going to think about the positive and negative consequences of use and identify patterns that potentially we can use to interrupt those behaviors. So that can help as we start thinking about behavior change. This can kind of help set the groundwork for that. So Bob's going to give us the rationale for a roadmap. And we call it a roadmap because that's also functional analysis because it's a lot less wordy.
Functional analysis. What in the world does that mean? Well, it is kind of a weird word, but a functional analysis really looks at analyzing the function or the purpose of a particular behavior. So why does that person keep doing the same thing over and over again? What's the purpose of that, okay? So they drink every day, they use drugs every day. What is the purpose of that, okay? So we want to give a good look at what's going on with their use. We got to find out how much they're using, how little they're using, what drug there is that they're using, and so on and so forth. And only the CSO knows that information, okay? So we want to influence the behavior either by decreasing a problem behavior or increasing a healthy behavior. So what we're trying to do really is help somebody move from a using behavior to a non-using behavior, okay? And so how do we do that? A functional analysis, you can also use the word the roadmap, because the functional analysis is like a roadmap of what drugs they use and who they use with and where they go and what they do, okay? So we want to find out what's going on with them by doing this functional analysis. And the CSO doesn't have all the information because she doesn't go out drinking with them or go out shooting dope with them at times, right? She doesn't do that, but she has enough information that can help us build a treatment plan.
So this is what it looks like. We typically will start by asking a CSO to describe a typical using or drinking episode. So not the worst, not the one that brings the biggest pit of fear, but what does it typically look like so we can get a sense of regular patterns. And you can go in any order on this worksheet. Oftentimes we'll start in the middle, the what, the when, the how much, quantity, we get those kind of specifics. And then we go into thoughts and feelings. So we want to talk about internal triggers. What are the things that are what do we think is happening inside before use is happening? And then external, who are they with? Where are they? When does it happen? So the first three columns are pretty, just getting a lay of the land. The following, I think the second two columns are a little bit more complicated. Not that they're hard, but just that they require a little bit more thought sometimes. So that's when we get into thinking about the consequences of the use. So the positive consequences or the short-term consequences, what is the loved one getting out of it? So, what do they like about who they're with, where they're at, when they're using? But I think two of the really important ones, what do we think that they're thinking or feeling when they're using? So what pleasant thoughts is use meeting for them? So anyone have any thoughts about what some of the pleasant experiences John might be getting from drinking? Thoughts or feelings? Escapism, yeah. Exactly, what else? He's socializing with friends, yes, because he drinks a lot with other people still, so that's part of his social network, absolutely. Anything else? So this can be hard because Julie is seeing all of the negatives, and so we're asking her, let's think about what he's getting from it. So I think just acknowledging that it's okay if it feels uncomfortable to imagine that there are parts of this that are still positive for him, because it stopped being positive for you quite a while ago. So allowing that to process that experience is part of this. And then when we think about long-term negative consequences, what I like to do is have CSOs think about all of the negative consequences. So we have all these areas, right? Physical, emotional, legal, job. Give me everything, because you've seen it all, you're seeing it firsthand, you're living it every day. And then I'll ask Julie, now go back and tell me which ones he would say are the negative consequences of his drinking. So he might say, well, interpersonal, because, I did miss that recital last week. That might be an area that he agrees with. But he might think that emotional is fine, and finances, there's no impact. Whereas Julie might see these things differently and have different perspective. But why we ask what he would agree with is because those are the areas where he might be most willing to have conversations about it and might be more open to acknowledging the negative impacts of use. So if he's completely, my job is completely fine, even though Julie says he just got passed over for a promotion, we're not going to start with the job because he doesn't, he is not in the space where he's ready to talk about the impacts on his job. So we talk about what do you think he's most willing to? And sometimes it's physical. Oh, well, he really, he'll talk about how he really can't sleep after he drinks a lot. Maybe we start there. So I think it's helpful to capture all of it, but then really drill down into, where does John agree, so we can start there. And these are the kind of foundations. So we've talked with Julie now about how to have the difficult conversations. She's got an idea for when and how and where he's drinking and what that looks like. She's trying to take care of herself on top of all that. So then we can get into, let's talk about behavior change. Let's use that roadmap to think about, all right, is there a way that we can What are those things she can do to help in between work and the kids' events so that he can delay drinking? Let's start there maybe. And so, like I said, craft can jump around. And so maybe Julie comes next week and she says this really awful thing happened and we need to talk about treatment, and I have to talk about it now so I'm prepared. Great. So we'll talk about treatment. And then we'll go back and let's talk about positive reinforcement and see how we can work on the reinforcing skills. So I really love that about this approach, because we can go wherever Julie wants to go with it, but still help her use all the skills.
Quick question. When you look at this, are you like, any of these stand out to you that you're like, what is that? Or I wish we talked about that, for feedback for us. So we selected just 3 to look at today. Okay. You can tell us later if there's anything. Cool. Okay. So our proven craft programs, again, we're thinking about how do we scale craft, how do we get it out there more. We have our 12-week family program, digital curriculum, with or without coaching, much like the Bob videos you saw. It's a real CSO walking through the different skills, speaking to a family member. And then we have our 8 hours of digital training for counselors, available on demand in English, one day hopefully French and other languages, but English today. And that's available to run through all the videos with Bob and other clinicians. And then also we run organization training. So we use the sort of digital backbone curriculum and then live sessions to practice and ask questions and apply to your case studies and that sort of thing. Just a little snapshot of our family program. 3-month program, short videos, exercises, quizzes, coaching sessions, and then our counselor training. And again, for counselors, but also peers, you don't have to have any particular qualification to learn craft. We have sort of 2 levels: a craft-informed practitioner, that's someone that's gone through the initial training, and then certification, which is really going through the supervised learning with coaching and feedback on your sessions. And if anyone here is US-based or has US-based colleagues, we are about halfway through our craft professional training study at the moment, funded by the National Institute of Drug Abuse. We can train 140 more professionals in the US in craft with this funding. And this will help us learn about the best ways to teach professionals craft online. So feel free to take a look at that or share it around. And with that, here are some links to resources, Dr. Meyers' website, our website, and the study website. And we'll open it up to any questions.
Thank you to both of you. It was an amazing training. So we have time for a few questions.
So I noticed you have a few different modalities that people can participate in your online program. What do people choose the most?
So right now, individuals tend to choose the on-demand, and organizations are choosing the group sort of live plus digital training. It's also sort of a cost structure thing. It's harder for an individual to book a group training and get people together. Yeah. And then in terms of the certification, that's one thing that we're really interested in learning more about. We know that in a lot of the clinical trials that have got good results with craft, they use certified clinicians. We provide families access to certified clinicians through our family program. We see it work, but we would love to learn more and sort of have data to say, why is this important? What sort of effect does more training get on outcomes? That sort of thing. So yeah, we would love to see more people get through it. And I would say also, you know, it takes a little bit more time, it takes a little bit more money, and professionals that we interact with don't think they need it, and maybe they're not prioritizing families, and it's not their one thing, so it's not the one thing they're going to spend time on yet.
Another question? No? So thank you again. And it's time to take a little break before the last session, so I invite you to go downstairs and have coffee, maybe.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you very much.